Well, a very good morning and welcome back to those of you who are joining us again. For those who this is their first session, then welcome to MACH 2022 Preview Week. My name is James Fudge. I'm Head of Events at the MTA. You join us on our third day of MACH Preview Week, which is the second day of these webinar sessions. So this is our first panel discussion we've got of the week, which is all about simple steps to automation for SMEs. I'd invite you to ask questions throughout. We're trying to keep this as a very sort of open discussion. So you'll see there's a questions chat box available. If you pop your questions in there, then I'll be relaying those to our panelists in a little while. I'm not going to go around and introduce everyone, so I will just introduce you to your chairman for the day, who is Mike Wilson, who is the Chief Automation Officer at the MTC. Mike's role is leading the drive to increase the adoption of automation in the UK manufacturing. Mike's also chairman of the British Automation and Robotic Association and has previously been chairman of the International Federation of Robotics. Mike is also a board member of the Manufacturing Technologies Association. He has over 35 years of experience in the application of automation to manufacturing across a broad range of industry sectors and is widely recognised as one of the leading authorities on the application of industrial robot systems in the UK. So without further ado, I will now hand you over to Mike.
Thank you, James, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, James. I don't think I need to say very much following that. I think you've covered most of my background. I think, though, I would like to say a couple of things. Probably the most important thing in terms of my role at the Manufacturing Technology Centre, and that is all about trying to help companies adopt more automation. We are behind the rest of the world in terms of our usage of automation within the UK. And just to give you an idea of that, the International Federation of Robotics measures something called robot density, and we're currently 24th in the world in terms of robot density, which is the number of robots per 10,000 workers. We are the 9th largest manufacturing nation in the world, and I'd expect us to be somewhere more around the 9th or 10th position. So we're lagging some of our major competitors. And there are various reasons for that, which we may well go into later. But I think the key really is if we're going to be competitive going forward, we need to see more widespread use of robotics and automation throughout all of our manufacturing, including the small and medium-sized enterprises. And hopefully today, we're going to tell you a little bit about how we think those businesses can adopt more automation. We've got an excellent panel, and I'm going to allow each of them to introduce themselves shortly. But I think one of the keys to this is we're here to answer any questions you might have. So please don't hesitate to pose questions to us, and we'll try and address those as we go through the discussion. So I'd like to introduce the panel now. Firstly, I'll ask Oliver to tell us a little bit about himself, his business, and also some examples of automation systems that he's been involved in. Thank you, Oliver.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's Oliver Selby. I'm a robotics business development manager for FANUC in Coventry. FANUC, I hope many of you will know, are a big Japanese manufacturer of CNC controls, robots, and a number of machines that utilize those control systems. Here in FANUC, UK, in Coventry, we are an OEM supplier. We do service support also for those products. And we are also a turnkey system supplier alongside supporting UK and Irish customers who integrate those products into SMEs and larger companies with emphasis on providing good ROI to those companies to ensure that they benefit from the automation systems. We've all been asked to actually submit and talk about a case study as such for an SME that we've worked with in the past who have utilised some of the products. And I'd like to reflect on an Irish customer who last year took delivery of a small machine loading system for use alongside one of their robo-drill vertical machining centres. Now, we deliver a number of machine loading systems across the UK and Irish markets, but this particular one had a special product delivery system in that they were actually able to produce around about 3 days of production parts with a single load of stock components. This gave them a huge benefit in terms of the ability to run overnight with the machine, and effectively 1 year payback was possible with that machine. I'll talk probably further in some of the further discussions we have during the next hour about how ROI can be calculated and what elements should go into an ROI calculation. But yeah, that's me. Hopefully I can provide some value to today's discussion.
Thank you, Oliver. Ashley, would you like to give us an introduction?
Sales director at Hydrofeed. We specialise in automating machine tools, CNC machine tools only. This is what our field of expertise is. So we're best known for the manufacture of and supply of short magazine bar feeds, which is historically an accepted form of automation and has been for a long time with the bar feeds. Our product range has grown with the demand for automation, so now we're looking at robotic automation, we're looking at long magazine bar feeds, and these are all things that we represent, we install, we support and deliver. The majority of customers that we deal with are either a subcontract SME or they are an SME that manufactures their own product. Now, Hydrofeed have installed and integrated into lots and lots of subcontract SMEs and also making their own products. The challenges that are common to all of these companies certainly are certain changes or challenges or market changes, if you like, certainly are a high mix to low to medium batch runs, a demand for more complex components and machine tools themselves, requiring higher skilled engineers, quick reactions, reduced lead times, less stock held and enhanced quality control. So all of these challenges, if you like, build to the automation must be 3 key things we believe, and which our products offer, which are flexibility, quick changeover times, and easy to use. So that environment, those 3 key concepts are very important. Our customers' installations and install base all look at key benefits. So I'm not going to pick particular customers because there are a lot out there, and there are many benefits from return on investments to reducing shifts to output of machines. But key points are a fundamental decrease in labour cost, multi-control of machines through a single operator, quick responses to fluctuations in demand, which is massive, especially in the subcontracts, an increase in spindle hours, of course, and fundamentally a gross margin and revenue growth. The RoboJob product, which is the robotic automation, is completely designed around machine tool loading and unloading, so lathes, milling machines, multitasking machines, and grinding machines too. We're able to offer standard off-the-shelf solutions that has simple software that we're able to show and demonstrate batch sizes that comes with the equivalent unmanned runtime, which therefore you can work out and look at things like return on investment. But we're actually able to talk through how you will use the automation in practice, so best practices to ensure it's the right solution for the customer. Typical conversations we have with customers are generally things that include looking at materials, so your mild steels, your stainless steels, your aluminiums, and then that therefore leads on to things like discussing tool life, sister tooling, leads on to metrology, regards to probing tools, probing workpieces, and also the work holding. So those elements that I've just mentioned now are critical to a stable automated process. And the UK, as you mentioned, Mike, is we're behind, but we can only see there's only one way the UK is going to be, and that is the UK machine tool tending is going to do nothing but grow. We aim to be at the forefront of that.
Thank you, Ashley. Peter, would you like to carry on?
I'm Pete McCullough. I'm the product manager for Doosan Robotics for the UK and Ireland, and I work for Mills CNC, or Mills CNC, which is part of Mills Group. We are based in Leamington Spa. We supply exclusively Doosan machine tools to the UK and Irish market, and as part of that, we have an automation division which encompasses both collaborative robots and industrial robots as well. My role specifically is with the collaborative robot side, so robots that can be used in conjunction with operators, provided that all the safety requirements are taken into account. Very flexible products that give you the ability to very quickly redeploy a piece of automation within a manufacturing environment, which gives a high level of flexibility, and as we've all said so far, a really good return on investment, which is critically important. My background is automation. I've worked in automation all my working life. I'm very much an advocate of the right kind of automation in the right application, making sure you choose simple, easy to start automation solutions or automation applications that you can implement, gain your confidence in what you're doing, and then move forward. I don't want to go across what everyone else has said because we're all here to promote automation, and Oliver and Ashley have made some very good points so far. I want to say that we're not exclusively working in the machine tending side, as Ashley was saying. We work across all sectors of automation with our collaborative robots. And I wanted to just give you a couple of examples that I'm quite happy to discuss in more detail of two very different ends of the spectrum. So we have a company in Scotland who we've introduced a machine tending collaborative automation solution to. They had some challenges to start with. We undertook a lot of online training via Zoom and other platforms to get them up and going due to the travel restrictions we were involved in, which worked very, very well. And one of the biggest and important kicks for me out of this was over the Christmas period, that company gained 90 hours of what they called free machining time by having the cobot running through the Christmas period. They didn't have to employ any extra labour, and it basically dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and made them convinced that the investment was so worthy that they're going to buy another one almost immediately. So you can very quickly see the return on that investment. And if it's done right, everything's taken into account, it works very, very effectively. On the other end of that spectrum, we have a company down on the south coast who's using a collaborative robot to test roulette wheels. So they are actually using the cobot to pick up and spin the wheel and then load the ball into the wheel, because they need to test and calibrate those roulette wheels before they go off to Las Vegas. This company is one of the largest suppliers of roulette wheels worldwide, and they're going to offer this automated solution to their competitors, should we say, to do calibration tests on their roulette wheels as well. So two ends of a spectrum, both of them reducing labour, but in a novel way, both of them showing how automation can be used effectively and obviously increase the growth of a company and generate revenue at a lower return on investment. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Peter. And last but by no means least, I'm sorry, Catherine, I realise I should have done ladies first, but I'm doing it in the order of the faces on the screen. So over to you, Catherine.
No problem. Good morning, everybody. I'm Catherine Knoll, and I'm the marketing manager for KUKA UK and Ireland. KUKA provide robot-based automation solutions and systems across a number of manufacturing sectors. We cover the UK and Ireland, and we have offices in the Greater Birmingham area and Dundalk in Louth. And we're supported by a network of strategic integrator partnerships. Now, today's event is going to talk a lot about the benefits that automation can afford to SMEs. And the case study I'm going to discuss shortly is a great example of just how automation and robotics can provide returns across a number of areas. And it relates to a company in Rotherham called ZND, and they are a fencing and barrier manufacturer. And they're a great example of how addictive automation can be. From mostly manual manufacture of these bulky products some 10 years ago, the company now has 2 automated production lines and a range of robots. And the outcome has been a 5-fold productivity increase and higher capacity. They manufacture the likes of temporary fencing, hoarding, pedestrian barriers and wire mesh, and its UK operation has invested, as I say, quite heavily over 10 years. The first fully automated line was installed in 2014. Changes have been profound. Some products are now assembled, brazed, lifted and stacked completely automatically, with robots playing a prominent role in those processes. Throughput is up massively, product defects are down, and employees don't have as much heavy lifting to do, so any risk to employees are also eliminated. Historically, a 2-man team would have made between 50 and 100 barriers a day. With the automated line, a 2-man team can now produce 500 per 8-hour shift. And whilst other automatic machinery is integrated into this production line, robots are an integral part of it. Now, their adoption of automation has been gradual, if not invested all at once. They've identified areas for improvement, and their first investment really began in 2009, and they've added and added and added and so on. Now, manufacturing on this particular production line manually across an 8-hour shift would have required 16 people. So you can see the difference it makes. And again, because they've automated, they haven't had to compromise on their work staff numbers or their headcount. As an example, 10 years ago, ZND had 120 people making these products mainly by hand. Today, ZND have got 120 people, sometimes even with more, because they're producing 4, maybe 5 times the volumes of products, thanks to automation. And as a result, staff can be redeployed into other areas, add more value in higher skilled roles with less physical strain. So happy to discuss that a little bit more as the event progresses and other areas of the benefits that automation and robotics can afford. But everybody, any questions, please ask and enjoy the event.
Thanks, Catherine. So I think we should probably start off with how an SME would actually start the whole process. Where does the journey start? So I'd be interested in getting the views of the panel, in particular from if you come across an SME that's got very little experience of automation and they're interested in procuring a solution or a system, how would you recommend that they went about the project? How would they start that to ensure that they're going to get a successful outcome? So, Peter, would you like to respond to that first?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Is how are you going to have a success? You need to look for a process that is going to give you the best return on your investment and also be simple to implement. What you want to do is you want to be able to gain confidence in that automation journey. You want to be able to look at a process, look at where you may feel you've got perhaps an operator or operators doing work that you on a daily basis walk past and say they could be doing something much better. And then look at how you can successfully apply an automated process to that. So I would think, and I'm going to keep this very, very simple at this stage. I'm sure others on the panel will talk in more detail. Keep it simple. Look for the simple wins within your organization and then apply automation to that. There might be lots of applications there that you think I really want to automate and they are quite complex to do, and that's great. But when you're starting as a small company, keep it simple, build on your success, gain confidence, the rest will follow.
Thank you, Peter. I think that's definitely valuable advice. Oliver, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I typically, when engaging initially, is to ensure that you get the experts in as quick as possible, because again, you can walk around your organization and believe that certain applications, certain processes are ripe for automation, should we say. But actually, you have an automation expert walk around and they look at the different processes, look at where there's a high degree of staff deployment within a certain process or application, and they may see something different. And this is really where we come from, in that we as a company offer say automation audits, such that we can walk around an organization, understand, look around the whole production line, and then feed into that adoption process of automation in the very early stages. We can give examples of where certain applications have been done before. We can feed into the ROI calculation stage to ensure that a well-rounded picture of a customer's site is provided very early on. And that's where I think the advantage of engaging with suppliers early on, or a supplier early on, is most advantageous.
Great, thank you. Ashley, any further comments?
Especially SMEs. I mean, you find a lot of SMEs, the managing directors have got quite a good handle on the business, and they know a lot of the detail of where they need to improve. So a lot of the time we'll speak to guys and they'll know the processes, or they'll know the product families, they'll know where the bottlenecks are, for example, within their business that they need to relieve, and then therefore look behind and in front of that to say, well, if we do automate that, what am I going to get from it, and what are we going to achieve from it? But if you're looking at it as an overall concept and saying, well, I want to automate I just want automation, I think you need to look at where you are within your business. It might be that you've got a bank of machines, a bank of milling machines, maybe some 3-axis, some 5-axis, some 4-axis, and you're thinking to yourself, I don't know where to start. And a good way sometimes to think about it is to use the 80-20 rule. You think about where your bread and butter work is that comes through. Don't come to us with, that's the most complex part that I make, and I make about 10 a year. Let's look at the bread and butter and where that actually brings the work through the business. And what do you want from the automation? Is it that you need to be changing jobs every day? Is it that you need to be looking at particular materials? Because it might be that you've got a mild steel one day and then aluminium the next day. But then you need to think about, well, how often do I need to visit that machine to actually keep a stable process? So there's a lot of ways that you can actually look at it to tackle it and say, how do we implement it? But it is about, as Oliver said, it's about kicking it off and understanding what generally you'll find the customer has got something in their mind to say, right, this is what I want to achieve. And sometimes it's about managing that expectation and actually saying, look, yes, you can do this, this, and this, but your cycle time's 2 minutes, and we want the robot to debug, we want it to wash, and we want to do that. But fundamentally, the machine's going to be waiting for the robot. So let's take a step back and have a different overall view on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Catherine, any further thoughts?
Kind of echoing the same sentiments, really. So understanding exactly what you're trying to achieve, and conduct a walk the floor exercise and establish areas that can benefit the most from automation or provide the biggest returns. Dependent on the industry, this could be a low value task such as end of line palletizing. It's unergonomic, but it's an easy area in which to apply robotics. And try not to look at the biggest problem, try and look at any underlying problems that need to be solved, and don't just apply automation for the sake of having automation, because it won't work.
Yeah, no, I think that's all fair comments. So basically keep it simple, engage experts as early as possible, find applications where you can get a reasonable return on investment, as in they cover a decent volume of work, but don't take on the hardest job in the factory. I think that's fundamentally what we're saying. And so if an SME has done all that, how do they kind of progress? That, you know, the challenge for me, and something I think, you know, from my past that I've seen quite a lot, is that the SMEs become very reliant on the suppliers in terms of identifying what the equipment needs to look like, and very few of them write specifications for what they want to buy, and a lot of people would advocate that that's an important thing to do. What are your kind of views on that? Do you think it's important to write a specification, and how should an SME go about that? Oliver, do you want to kick off with that?
Yeah, can do, Mike. Yeah, so yeah, we completely push customers down the road of creating a user requirement specification, a URS. This feeds into the quotation stage from our point of view, in that it provides us a very clear specification on what the customer's expectations and requirements are. It also drives the customer to have thought about previously the information they need to feed to us in regards to drawings or models of components, how those parts are fed into the system, how they want them to be processed, so to say, cycle times. It also gives us an idea on existing equipment specifications. So, for example, electrical specifications that we need to adhere to for the site we're talking about. It also feeds into what the customer's expectations are in terms of payback and things like that. Now, that URS, what we effectively do is quote against that URS. And what we tend to do is push back on the customer if there are things that are missing from that URS. Because what we want to do is tie up, first of all, our quotation with that URS and ensure that from both directions, from the customer's point of view and from our point of view, we are fully understanding of the expectations of the project. One of the most key points within the URS is that the acceptance criteria are defined such that we need to fully understand what we're aiming for. How is that customer going to accept the equipment once it's been produced within our shop floor, for example? So having FAT criteria that also then lead on to SAT criteria, so factory acceptance test and site acceptance test. Those criteria can be defined as early on within the process as possible within that URS. That's kind of how we drive our customers, and so we're more than happy to provide templates for that URS if it's something that they've never done before, and also happy to feed in to that URS creation stage. Again, it kind of comes back to my previous sort of answer in that engaging the experts early on drives the customer down the right road for that automation adoption route.
Yeah, thank you, Oliver. Catherine, what do you think in terms of URS? I mean, do you see many URSs from clients, and should we see more?
We do. User requirement specification or comprehensive functional design specification allows the user to clearly state what their needs and expectations are, and it gives us an ultimate understanding of what they're trying to achieve and how it, whatever that might be, will function to the benefit of their business. It also sets measurable buy-off criteria for a successful installation. So once that cell or solution is built and then we move forward to FAT, as Oliver said, you're going to have those successes that ultimately deliver a solution that the customer is going to use and is going to deliver returns to them.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, from my experience, I think one of the challenges often is that the customer knows his factory inside out and he knows his products inside out, and the supplier doesn't, and there needs to be that transfer of information. Peter, you got any thoughts in terms of how that's best achieved?
Yeah, I think one of the key things, and I totally agree with what everyone said. Looking at it from a slightly different point of view, I always like to think of it as managing expectation, because people who are new to automation have an expectation of what they want to achieve. Whether that's achievable or not can be debatable, and it's debatable. It's important to have that discussion early. So I believe, and we do this a lot because we produce fully turnkey systems, which might be inspection systems, they could be palletization systems, etc., etc. So it's not just necessarily a cobot or a robot supply, but you work in partnership with your prospective customer, guide them on that route. Don't make them feel that they've got a document that is there to beat them over the head with, or to beat you as a supplier over the head with. It's the guide and the drive towards achieving that end solution. And if you do it in partnership with your customer and work very closely, because we all know, and I think everyone who's listening to or watching this webinar knows, projects never go according to plan. You have to work, be reactive, and work together to come to a solution. And exactly as was said a little bit earlier, I think Oliver said it, that the customer is the expert on his process, but sometimes it's inherent knowledge they have that doesn't get transferred when it should do. And how many of us have been in the position where they said, oh yeah, well, we knew that would happen. It would have been useful to know that 3 or 4 months ago. So that time you have to, and I seriously some smiles there, because I think we've all been in that situation. So you need to work closely with them. We need to guide them and support our customers in their journey. And again, document FATs, SATs, clear metrics to measure against, no surprises.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair comment. And I think the other thing that's probably important from developing the URS point of view is it does allow a fair comparison when you're getting multiple quotations for a particular job, because you should be then comparing apples with apples rather than different interpretations of what might be required. And I think one of the challenges a lot of automation providers often face is that people are attracted by the lowest price, but that isn't necessarily the right answer. So I don't, Ashley, have you got any kind of views on pricing versus the specification?
I think it's important, but I don't think it's always necessary, if I'm completely honest, because you'll find that you'll go to a subcontractor who's an SME, and they don't know what they're going to be machining in the next quarter. Yes, they've probably got foresight of planning for the next 2 months, but because they're a subcontractor, they need that element of flexibility to say, well, you can't say I'm going to be making this and I'm going to be making them for the next year. The subcontract industry don't have that. Yes, a lot of companies have repeat parts, they have families of parts, but they're about buying a machine which is capable of maybe a 5-axis machine. They know, yes, it can do 3-axis, 4-axis, full 5-axis simultaneous work. So they've got every base covered almost. But I do think that documenting things is invaluable. It's massively important to say what you're going to achieve, how you're going to achieve it, what route you're going to take to achieve it. And when it's actually on the floor, I like to walk through how the raw material comes through the door and how it's actually going to leave the place. So are we going to be able to know that we are going to achieve what the customer wants us to? Because yeah, that's certainly the subcontract element of an SME, and I know of the MTA, subcontract machine tool companies are a big part of it, and that, as I said, foresight and planning isn't that easy for those types of guys. If you said to someone, well, we generally work with, we say, well, if you're going to do a band of parts, so you're going to say, well, from one weight to another, or one size of part to another size of part, and I know everything within that, I'm going to be able to automate. So it's just a different angle from the subcontract side.
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment. Thank you, Ashley. So we've got a client who's potentially written a specification. He's identified his application. We've already touched on this, but one of the next key elements is the return on investment calculation to figure out if it really is justifiable. And most companies often really just look at the cost of the equipment versus the labor saving that they might make. Whereas, I think we all agree that there's probably other things that could be brought into that calculation. So Oliver, have you got any sort of advice you could offer in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, typically, like you say, Mike, it's normally a straight fight out between the cost of the automation versus labour. But I think when you start pulling in the other tangible and some of the intangible benefits that can be looked at as part of the ROI calculation, it kind of shows a different picture to how that investment is going to pay back. So some of the other tangible benefits, rather than just the cost, are versus labour, should we say, are things like quality increases. So we can see and we can probably monitor the quality of parts leaving an automation system a lot better than a manual solution. We can also see that we gain in terms of hours run or spindle hours, as Ashley put. Some of the intangible benefits are things like health and safety. Maybe the application that we're looking at, some of the added value tasks that can be automated within the cycle can lead into that or feed into that ROI calculation, making the automation payback quicker or providing a higher value than what the direct labour saving would be in comparison. there's many of them. We could talk for probably an hour or so just on the intangible benefits of automation, but I don't want to go on. So.
Well, fair enough. Catherine, have you got any points you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think as Oliver said, kind of financial return is always seen as the main payback, but there are so many other areas. I mean, time savings is one. Robots don't need to take breaks, as we know. They don't go on holiday. They don't need to take time off sick. They can operate 24/7, even in lights out scenarios. Other factors can include productivity gains, product quality output, traceability, reduced costly recalls, upskilling and adding value in other areas. And I think an important factor as well is a company that embraces automation and robotics can be seen as forward-thinking, as progressive, as dynamic. And to customers looking for a manufacturing partner, that's quite a big USP.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So Ashley, in that respect, in terms of the return on investment, do you have any views as to, what companies should be aiming for? We do hear a lot of companies are aiming for 1 year or 18 months, and sometimes it can be difficult to justify the automation on a short return like that. What's your feeling as to what would be a realistic target that companies ought to be aiming for?
For the particular products that we supply, it is about how much you're going to use it and versus against the product that you're going to put on it and the hourly rate you might get for that particular machine as well. But yeah, payback periods can be from either months, depending upon how you're doing it and how you're achieving it. It might be that one particular customer that we've had, the robot loads and unloads the components, it air blows them, it turns the part over for the second operation. We have work holding for op 1 and op 2 in the same machine. The customers previously had one 5-axis machine for op 1 and then a big tombstone machine for op 2, and he's taken a whole machine out of it. So the return on investment is huge for what he's trying to achieve there, and it goes down to your overheads are less, bits and bobs like that. But in our, again, going back to the subcontract side of things, you find that companies that want to invest in automation are busy. They're really busy. They need to do something about it. And if they buy more machines, it's more headcount. If they buy more machines, it's more space. If they buy more machines, it's a bit of a headache. They've got to keep it running. So let's try and deal with what we've got on the shop floor, and deal with what's in front of us to say, right, let's pick a machine that's most capable because I know it does everything. But again, in our industry, we see a lot of, because they are so busy and up to their eyeballs in work, it might be that you've got a batch of 100 parts to go through, which runs for normally 4 or 5 days, but you're so busy with trying to catch up, you only make a batch of 50. So you're splitting batches, and that becomes a headache. But splitting batches is really very common in guys that I speak to. And if you're running a single shift and you've got hours left in the day to let the system just sit there and run with, do it. Finish that batch off. Get to the point where you need to be. It enables planning to be a lot easier. It stops breakdowns, the communication. It's the flow of work on the shop floor. So yeah, I've sort of diversed a bit there, but yeah, the return on investment periods can be 1 2 years, I'd say, particularly for us.
Okay, so you are seeing examples, as Catherine mentioned, of companies that are running effectively lights out. They're getting extended production periods, unmanned in effect, to get more out of their existing facilities.
Massively. There's, again, it comes down to, you're not going to run duplex stainless steel on a machine with a 12-station turret all day, every day. You need things like probing, you need things like sister tooling, you need a stable process. The way to achieve that stable process is to sit down with people like us and say, right, this is what I'm trying to do, this is how I'm achieving it. So it might be that you run your mild steels during the day when you know your tool life, you need to keep an eye on it, you need to listen to the machine, you need someone there. Then at night, I'm going to just run alley and plastics, all right, because I know my tool life. I need to just think about my swarf management, where it goes, and making sure the parts are clean. And again, as I think Oliver mentioned about quality is and the repetitive side of it, it's that you can't duplicate.
Okay, no, thank you. I'd like to move on to a slightly different subject now, but there's been an awful lot of discussion around collaborative robots, commonly known as cobots. There's been a lot of interest in the marketplace. People are seeing them as potential machines for their factories, but I do think there's an awful lot of sort of misconceptions as to what a cobot can do versus an industrial robot. What does it really mean, and so on. So I think it'd be useful really for us to just really kind of explain what role cobots have, where they should be applied, and what the benefits might be for a typical SME. So Peter, maybe you'd be a good one to pick that one up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think there's been cobots that have been perhaps over the last few years in the early stages of introduction put into applications where they weren't necessarily suitable, but they were sold as suitable. You have to be very mindful that with any piece of automation that you put into place, it has to be safe, it has to meet the health and safety standards, it has to meet all the guidelines. A collaborative robot, by its nature and its design, is developed in a way that it can work in the same workspace or in the same area as an operator without the need for any ancillary guarding, okay, which is great. It means then that you can reduce the footprint, you don't need hard guarding around there, etc., etc. However, bear in mind, any piece of automation is only as safe as what it's handling. So, for example, if a collaborative robot's picking up a gun and waving it around, this is an example I tend to use, it isn't collaborative, okay? I know that's a bit of an extreme example, but you need to be mindful about what it's doing. There are issues with payload, with speed, where you start to move quicker with higher payloads. They're not ideally suited to collaborative robots. You're looking at a more industrial application guarding, because we don't want to have an operator come into contact with something that could seriously injure them. Collaborative robots give the ability to put in place on a production line a flexible piece. I often describe them as flexible, easy to implement automation solutions, okay? They can work with an operator in a collaborative environment, risk assessed, of course. They can also do applications, sealant application, assembly, etc., etc., taking away those repetitive operations from an operator and allowing them to be doing the more value added, shall we say, or accurate, or sometimes operations where you need an operator to be manipulating and more dexterity. So I believe that you see the space for collaborative robots is in simple, repetitive operations, leaving the operators to do the more value-added work. Okay, that's my take on a collaborative robot and how it should be used in a factory. Doesn't have to be there; it can also be guarded as well. In certain applications, the cobot can be guarded and be used very successfully and effectively to create a production solution. And the beauty with the programming of a collaborative robot is the ease of programming means you don't have the complexity that you may have with an industrial robot, which is significantly more attractive to smaller companies who don't have that level of expertise within their organisation.
Fair enough. Thank you, Peter. Catherine, have you any views in terms of whether it's, for a typical SME, should they be thinking collaborative robot first and then industrial robot, or how should they be looking at it?
I think that there's a misconception that a cobot is just a robot without guarding, where in reality, cobot opens the market for automating applications that a standard robot just can't. Or is unsuitable for. So applications where a high degree of sensitivity and dexterity might be required for working alongside humans. I think there's another misconception that cobots don't operate at speed. They're designed for that intricate work, that collaborative activity next to a human being. A cobot and a human together can sometimes probably be more productive than two humans. And the best application use for cobots is the repetitive function, so doing things over and over again that ultimately are ergonomic. So couple that with a human, and the robot takes on the repetitive function, and the human can take the cognitive area of the application on.
Okay, oh, thank you. And you know, if a company is looking at cobots, I think a lot of cobots that are going to the marketplace at the moment are often integrated by the end user themselves rather than an automation provider. Has anybody got any views as to, you know, the best way of doing that? Should the end users be thinking about doing it themselves, or should they always be looking for an expert to help them, particularly for the first one? Oliver, you any views on that one?
Yeah, Mike, so from our experience, a lot of end users do look to try and integrate or look at cobots for their first robot to automate. One point of caution is that the safety regulations are no less stringent for a cobot than they are for the industrial robots. So it probably even more so in some cases. So where Peter was reflecting on that payload and speed have to be risk assessed, you also have to go into a bit further into a bit more depth in regard, say, working at head height, for example. The speeds that a cobot can work at head height with a payload or with a gripper design for machine loading, for example, may be completely prohibitive. Yeah, maybe at such a slow speed it doesn't add any value to the application. I would take as an end user integrating a cobot as my first cobot with extreme caution, and probably engage with the experts initially to start off with, whether they are the OEM of that particular cobot, whether they're an integrator, or even to engage with safety professionals. There's a number of companies who are cropping up who will provide that kind of initial expertise that an end user may need to guide them correctly in the use of a cobot within their particular application.
No, thank you. I think that's valuable advice, and I think a lot of business owners probably appreciate this, but we're not always sure. But the business owner is responsible for the safety, and therefore, you know, if they do it themselves, then they need to make sure that it's done right. And expert advice is often a very good way of addressing that, at least for the first one. We've had a few questions coming in from the audience, so I'd just like to go back to the URS if I may. But are sort of end users, clients often daunted by the idea of writing a URS, or even unsure how to start? So I know, Oliver, you kind of touched on that, but do you want to expand a little bit more?
I think it's a good question. I think yes, they are from experience. And my only response to that is that as suppliers of equipment, we're here to help that process, and we can only say no, yeah, as a supplier to support a potential future customer. As I say, we've got templates we can feed into that discussion around URS. And as touched previously, we're not the experts in the process, but we can support in terms of how we can collect data, how the end customer can collect data to feed into that specification. Yeah, we know what we need as a supplier to be able to offer a solution. We need to know what the parts are, what the throughput is, what the expectations are in terms of additional processes maybe that need to be covered by the automation. And again, it kind of goes back to engage with the supplier early, because as a new adopter of automation, you're going to benefit from their experience, not only for the first project, but for every project then on. You know.
Yeah. No, fair comment. Catherine, what are your thoughts on that in terms of do people avoid writing URSs purely because they find them difficult?
I think it's understanding where technology can be adapted as well. As Oliver said, it's our customers' job to understand their processes, and it's our job to see how we can supplement those processes through the use of robotics and automation. I think there needs to be an understanding as to exactly what they're trying to automate and why they want to automate it. There might be several processes within a supply chain that might need looking at. So a walk the floor exercise or a site survey with the customer So picking up on what the highest throughput areas might be, or if there's any issues affecting the well-being of staff. So
Sorry, Catherine, we can't hear you. No, okay. Sorry, Catherine, we lost you there. Do you want to have another go? No, I think she's gone quiet. Peter, have you got anything to add?
Yes, I'd actually written down due diligence. I think it's present company accepted. I think don't just take it on face value that someone is an expert because they say they're an expert. Okay, make sure as a customer looking for a supplier, you do your homework. Look at the people who are going to supply your products. Look at what their experience is. Do they have a pedigree in the area that you actually want to implement your automation? Okay, and now I know that might sound obvious, but when you talk about new technologies coming along, as we all know, a lot of flash in the pan, people come up and they can have a nice website, etc., etc. Do your homework. Look for those companies who have got a good track record, good references. I know this might sound really obvious, but sometimes the obvious things people miss. If you get a company that ticks all those boxes, the URS is a simple thing because you work together to create that URS. It's not something that the supplier will say, well, you go away and do it, and then we're going to blame you if we don't get everything, if you miss something off your URS. Again, it's like Catherine said, it's about the company coming to site surveying, getting that feeling, and you can understand by talking to them people, they know how to put together an automation solution for you, and not just say, let's talk about collaborative robots, here's a box, go away and do it. And if you need to, we might be able to put you in touch with someone who can help. Particularly for myself, that's not the way we work. Is we want to work with customers to create a complete solution, but also we want to leave customers in a situation where they are independent. And Mike, this was something you alluded to a little earlier. Customers who have an automation solution and they can't support themselves. For me, for Mills, for Doosan, we aim to give a situation where not only do they have a solution, but they have the ability then to go forward with that solution and feel confident then to take it on, manage it, because there are always times when you need to manage and change processes. And by doing that in the right way, the right URS, the right expectations, etc., you get to that point very, very easily. So coming back to the main point, do your homework on your suppliers first.
And I think that's a very fair point. And maybe I should just add into this that there are sources of independent expertise. So the Manufacturing Technology Centre, the High Value Manufacturing Catapult, is one of those, and we can provide assistance in terms of helping companies write the URS, helping companies identify the application, and helping companies choose the right suppliers. So if companies are, if you like, concerned about working directly with a supplier straight off the bat, we can come in and provide that independent expertise early on to maybe give them a little bit of reassurance that they're being directed in the right way. And ultimately, we'd be there to help them pick the right supplier so that they can then develop the solution. So, I think there are sources of expertise, either direct with suppliers or independent organizations, that can definitely help the SMEs apply more automation. So we're kind of running out of time, but I think I'd just like to finish off really with, if you were offering one kind of key piece of advice to an SME that's thinking about applying robots and automation, sort of what would that be and why? So Ashley, maybe we could start with you.
I think to kick it off, you have to speak to the experts, which is us, to say, where are my limitations? Where are my boundaries on what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to achieve? And identify those areas that you are trying to relieve bottlenecks or lack of skilled staff. It might be anything where talk to us to say, how do I keep a stable automated process? That's the key to it, because it could be that you're producing scrap left, right and centre, but it's about ensuring that you do have that stable process. But if you need to look at increasing productivity, increasing the growth of the company, looking at Industry 4.0 ideas, let's come and talk to us, because it's about where you can arrive with what we can say, what's possible and what isn't possible. And I think we said before, let's manage a bit of expectations, because robots aren't walking around the shop floor putting bits in and putting bits out, like Boston Dynamics sort of look thing. It's not quite sometimes as what is perceived, but yeah, come and have a chat. Let's talk it through is the first stage, definitely. And don't be intimidated. Don't think robots aren't for us. Don't think because I haven't got one part that I make over and over and over, that's not what robotics is about. Industrial robots, I mean, our systems, you can change between jobs within 5 minutes. That's the USP of our systems, but that's where our target market is. But don't be intimidated, scared by the automation, because it isn't what it used to be, if you like, of 10 to 20 years ago. And if you think about 10 to 20 years ago, if companies of 10 to 20 years ago didn't embrace new technologies that they do, that are out now, those companies, what would they be doing? What would they have on their shop floor? These are the new technologies coming through. Robotics is that next form of accepted automation, certainly in our industry. So yeah, it's about developing those new technologies.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. Catherine, what would be the key piece of advice you'd offer to somebody, and why?
Okay, it's quite a short message, but I'd probably say that the greatest threat to employment is not automation, but an inability to remain competitive.
So you're basically saying businesses should be looking at improving their competitiveness to ensure that we have jobs for the future. Without
a doubt. And if I reference the ZND case study again, and we see how they've benefited from the adoption of automation and robotics, it's a no-brainer. And to remain competitive, people need to be seen to be forward-thinking and dynamic, and to be able to address that supply versus demand balance.
Yep. No, great. Thank you. Oliver, how about you? Key piece of advice?
Yeah, I'd say from our point of view, it's having a commitment to that automation journey. Don't expect miracles on the first venture into automation. Typically, sort of from experience, companies are looking for 1 or 2 year payback periods in the UK. Looking further afield, those countries, regions that have got higher automation adoption than us, typically have longer ROI periods in which they want that to see that payback. Typically in Germany or Sweden, 2 of the sort of highest adopters of automation, you can see 3, 4, 5 year payback periods for that automation. So they've really got a commitment to the process, an adoption process of automation. Kind of reflecting on Ashley, yeah, that expectation of ROI needs to be slightly longer, maybe initially, and have that full commitment.
Yep, thank you. How about you, Peter?
Yeah, I'm just going to run through a few points very quickly to say that. I'm going to go with the ones we started with. You need to keep it simple. Do your homework with your supplier. Don't think automation isn't for you. Ask the experts, get people to come in and reference and see what can be done for you. And I think one of the last pieces of advice for me is, if you don't do it, your competitors will. Be it in this country or be that worldwide. This isn't something that's going to go away. Automation is here, it's here to stay, it's growing. We can't stay where we are, as Mike said, 20th in the world for automation. It's going to grow. We've all seen what can happen with a pandemic. We've all can see what happened with supply chains. Things have to change. be at the start of that change now, not trying to catch up later.
No, I think that's a good comment. So, you know, I think maybe just to sort of wrap all of that up, I think you know, we've probably said it multiple times, but to me, a lot of this is about vision. It's about a vision of where you want to be in 5 or 10 years' time. You know, what you want your business to look like, how competitive you want it to be, how you want it to work. And it's about then using the tools that are available to achieve that vision. And one of those tools is automation, and it's one that we're not utilizing within the UK as widely as we could. So I think the keys to it really is, you know, we want UK manufacturing to be competitive, and to be competitive, we should be using more automation. To do that, you know, we shouldn't be intimidated because we haven't used it before. Use the expertise that's there to help you do it, to embark on that journey. And as various people have said, start simple, start with the easier applications, and work towards the harder ones, so that you get that success, and success builds on success. Use the expertise, experts to help you do it, and maybe don't have any significant over expectation, if you like, in terms of the first installations. Make sure what you're aiming for is realistic, and if you aim for realistic, you'll get the results that you want, and that'll then encourage you to move on to new installations in the future. And if we can get that cycle going, then we'll have many more companies adopting a lot more automation in the UK. So I'd just like to thank our panel, Catherine, Peter, Oliver, and Ashley. It's been very interesting, the input that you've made, and I hope the audience has found it useful. And thank you to the audience for sticking with us and listening to our views. Back to you, James.
Mike, thank you very much. That's been very much appreciated. And again, just to echo my thanks to all our panelists today. I think, again, just to echo what you said, one of the key things there is, you know, don't be daunted by this. If you do want to make contact with any of these people, by all means, feel free to email us at the MTA, or again, check out the A to Z on the MACH website, where you can visit individual companies and contact them directly. So again, a huge thank you to all of you for joining us today. For those of you who are joining us for the next sessions, there is Howard Mitchell, who is the head of innovation, who's going to be talking about supply chain and innovation from high speed 2. That's at 1 o'clock today. And then tomorrow morning, we have Stephen Jeffers from Siemens talking about decarbonisation. So further details of both of those are again on the MACH website, which I would encourage you to use. Again, I've been saying at the end of all of our sessions, there is a quick feedback form that pops up. If you could just answer those for us, that really helps us. Both in terms of the next sessions that we're planning, and also for the event and content next April. Once again, thank you again to Mike and to all our panelists, and I wish you all a very good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.